2021 if we really want to grant those funds or not. So that's a decision that we need to make collectively on that, because with the deficits that we'll experience in the state accommodations tax fund, we might need to keep some of that for our fund balance as well. Community assistance, it's a kind of the same situation. In 2020, we made the requirements more restrictive because of state law that those funds have to be for a public purpose. They will be more restrictive this year than last year because we made that decision kind of late in the game, and we didn't want to punish those that had already applied. We budgeted $234,000 last year, or this year, I say. I'm sorry, I'm working in 3 years at all times because right now I'm going through the audit for 2019. I'm currently in 2020 and I'm working on 2021. So my the way I describe things gets messed up sometimes, so I apologize. And then that's another thing, if we want to consider actually doing community assistance grants in 2021, we might not be able to afford to do that in 2021. So it's something that we need to consider, and we need to decide that before we send the applications out. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or comments on that. Okay.
Well, my only comment would be that if we're going to put out the applications, that we ought to have a huge disclaimer at the top of everything saying that we have, you know, no commitment at this point to fund any of these programs for 2021 until we see what happens.
Yeah, I would rather make that decision now and not even put the application out, just so we're not giving false hope to people and having them go through the process of filling out an application that they might not even get an award for. But Councilmember Jackson.
I just was hoping you could send us again both lists of the accommodations recipients and the community assistance. I know that, you know, the full council got them at the beginning of the budget year or whatever, but it would be helpful because we are dealing with organizations that serve the combined mission of the community in sync with the city. And so I do feel like we should be looking at the realities of who we would be turning away. I'm not disputing the fact that this might be the year that we have to withhold some of those assistance grants, but I do think it would help us to understand who the current recipients are.
Sure, I can send that to you. Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes, I agree. Agree wholeheartedly with that, because I believe this is some trying times, and we didn't figure that this was going to happen. This is something beyond our control. And I believe if we go out and explain to the community what's going on and what's happening, we're going to have to do some cutting and some major cutting, and we're going to have to keep some things from this budget to keep this budget going. So I think with that in mind, just explaining to them exactly what's taking place. And I think we need to probably try to keep some of this money on hands to keep this city operating like we should. That's just my point, you know.
Question. My question is, if we did that and somehow whatever, the feds finally say we're going to give X amount of dollars to municipalities, will we then be able to put that money back and maybe make awards later? In other words, I think we should keep it totally off the table. But if we were to get reimbursement from the Fed or the state at some point, would we be able to open up that competition later on in the year?
I don't know if we would be able to do it with federal dollars.
Okay.
Depending on what the restrictions are on those funds, specifically for revenue loss, which is what we would need if we would be able to do that, if we wanted to. So I'm not sure, Councilmember Gregory, how that would work. Okay.
But I do think that we should hold back on even announcing the grants so that we don't have to go back and say, hey guys, we shouldn't have because of. So I really think the best approach is just to hold off on them.
But what is the normal time frame for sending out the announcement and the applications?
We would send the application out probably later part of June or July. We would, they would, well, okay, and they would be due in July. We'd issue it out in June and then they would be due at the end of July.
Councilmember Waring and Shade wanted to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amy, I saw the April numbers, and obviously the year-to-date numbers didn't look as bad as we may have thought, but I think some of the reality will probably show with the remainder of April and obviously all of May. When are we supposed to sit down again? I mean, I'm just wondering if we can make it at least toward the end of June, we'd have a better picture of the unfolding realities of all the various tax revenues, excepting the property taxes, of course. A more handle on the projections of what probably will unfold for the second half of the calendar year. When are we going to have another ad hoc committee meeting, in particular focusing on 2020 cash flows?
The end of June. I think it's in the last week of June.
I'm just wondering, maybe some of this conversation could be held off until we get a look at the second quarter or the majority of the second quarter of 2020. And I think we have a better handle on the cash flow, in particular as it looks at the general fund, because that's the one that we really have to be concerned with. And right now, Amy, does the city have a line of credit?
No, we don't have a line of credit.
Listen, I knew that. I just want to make sure that everybody else knows that.
We have our undesignated fund balance, if you want to call that a line of credit. But
well, I don't want to look at that because we get smacked with a
we absolutely have to.
Right. And maybe you have some conversation for this a little bit down the line, but I don't know whether a tax anticipation note will have some application saying the event that, because it's a timing issue with us right now, really.
It is.
We will get the taxes. It may get caught up in next fiscal year, even the 15, 18 months out, but we'll get the revenue. And I'm just wondering, we'll need time if we do need a tax anticipation note. Obviously, the rate will be very attractive at the rates in the market today. And just to have that in our back pocket, just in case, these revenues prove to be
I am talking
a little bit more dire than.
I do have some.
Okay, good. I'll hold that up then.
Oh,
great. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Shade, you had your hand up a minute ago, and then Shealy.
This is going to sound like a repeat of what other folks have mentioned, but I think what's important, and Amy brought this up earlier, is that we need to let these folks know if they're depending on money from the city, that we need to tell them now that that's in jeopardy, because they have their own budgets they need to be working on. And I'm not sure wherever all the sources of income they're going to receive from other municipalities or governments, but they're going to find that pinch from them as well. So as a matter of just basic fairness to those organizations, it's important that we tell them up front so that as they go into their budget process, this money that you receive may be in jeopardy for 2021. I think that's just a matter of basic fairness to them. If we have the money and we can give it to them, that's fine. If not, then they just know it up on the 6 months in advance, or whatever the budget year may be for them.
Well, we have been in communication with both ATAX and community assistant grantees because, we normally would give community assistance grants fund the full amount up front, but we didn't do that. We did half, and we told them we would get back to them, when we could do the remainder, to expect to hear from us sometime in July. So as far as 2020, they know obviously that we're having some issues with cash, obviously. And then the same with the ATAX. So we've paid them 1 quarter. We pay them quarterly, normally when we receive the check from the state for those state ATAX funds, and we paid them 1 quarter of their grant, and told them that we would, obviously, that their funding would be affected by this because we only pay what we receive. And so they're all pretty much aware. So I would think they would also be aware that next year would be in jeopardy as well, but we will communicate with them, Councilmember Shade.
I just say let's just give them a heads up so they're not overextending. I mean, they're going to expect something from us. I know they are. We're going through that already. Thanks, Amy.
Councilmember Shealy, did you want to add something?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to kind of say some of what Councilman Shade said, but I just think we need to let them know that we're not going to have any applications at this point and just leave it at that for right now, so that there is no guessing, and just say, listen, we're not going to have applications right now, and let them know that right up front right now, and just kind of move forward from there.
Well, just listening to a consensus here that Councilmember Gregory's started was, I think it's clear to send out applications in June would be premature at best, and that it would be appropriate to send everyone a notice that normally applies, that we're delaying it, at least delaying, and may not be able to have a program next year, and we're going to evaluate that and let them know later in the year. So that will put them on notice to make serious plans about their own budgets for next year. And then, as Amy mentioned, they're already on notice in a way, given the payment schedule that she's altered for this year. But yeah, I think a notice would be appropriate. I'm not saying that we're not going to be able to do it, but I hope we'll be able to do it, but we don't know enough at this point to say, and to give them a notice and push it back with no certain date at this point, I think is appropriate. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
It does to me.
Fine to me.
Yeah, me as well. Sounds reasonable to me.
All right.
I
I'll
agree.
draft a letter and I'll send it to you now for you to look at to see if it sounds okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So next is looking at our 2020 budget for this year, right?
That's correct. So it's deceiving for sure, because we're, obviously we're not doing too bad right now. That's true. However, I think some of this is probably timing for sure, in terms of the expenditures anyway. But you can see our interest income is way down so far in April. We're noticing rents and concessions in our recreational facilities. That's where we're really starting to see the hit in those areas. Whereas when we talked last month, I said I wasn't really sure exactly how that was we weren't really projecting that at the time. We didn't have enough data, but I can tell you in our office that we are signing lots of refund requests for recreational facilities. So May will also see a bigger loss as well. So I think right now we look kind of okay, but it's somewhat deceiving just because of the timing of everything. So same with April, because we were shut down sort of, for a period of time. I don't know if some of the savings that we're seeing in expenditures is a timing issue in terms of people being out of the office and processing invoices timely or not. But I'm certain some of it is just because we weren't fully operational, and we will see some natural savings that way. But again, I'm just cautioned that some of this could be a timing issue in terms of us getting invoices timely from the department, since everybody was working remotely and that type of thing. But I think once we get through May, next month when we meet, we'll have, I think every month we'll have a better indication of where we are. But May will probably be a good indication of how things are running. So
some of those, what look like savings and expenditures, are just the fact that we put off a purchase. We've had something in the budget that we had anticipated to buy by this point, and because of what's going on, everybody's being careful, and as they should be, about spending every dollar. And if we can push something off for a while, that's what everybody's kind of doing, and that's why you see what looks like a savings of $13 million. It's not really that much in savings, but as Amy just said, more a matter of timing. But that's important right now. Timing is important, because if we can push off the expenditures, that will match the deficit in revenue, which the other slide again is a little deceptive in the fact that it doesn't include those accommodations, hospitality, and parking revenues that we know we're so short. That's where we're really short.
Right. And most of the departments are, we're working really well with them, and they know some of the newer initiatives they had budgeted for in 2020, they're holding off on, and bigger purchases they are holding off on. So we are communicating well with most of the departments.
Hey, Amy, this is Dudley. We can't capture any of that?
Capture any of what?
Capture any of what we're talking about now, what appears to be some savings in the expenditure side?
We will be able to, yes, but this is as of the end of April, when we are A/B schedules, we're working remotely. So May, we're starting to come back, and that's when you're seeing invoices being processed and things like that. So we'll be able to tell better after May.
Okay.
Of where we are.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now just an update on the initial revenue loss projections that we talked about last month. So pretty much still on target to where we thought we would be. $41.8 million loss is what I projected last month. It's down to 41.1, not that much. The first quarter state accommodations tax check came in a little higher than we expected. We did end up receiving more hospitality funds than we thought because of the deferral. We weren't really sure how those checks would come in, but we did have some that continued to pay. And municipal accommodations was a little bit less, and parking revenues were a little more. So we're still pretty much on target to what we had projected last month. I wouldn't expect that it will change too much. Any questions?
If it changes at all, you think it'll go up?
I hope not. I'm hoping that as we get back in operations that I'm trying to be skeptically optimistic.
Okay, I'm with you.
Okay. So tourism funds, unless you all did anybody have any questions? I don't want to move on. Okay. So total loss, anticipated loss is $21.3 million for our tourism funds. We talked about the current available fund balance that we had that we could use. So it's $17 million. State accommodations, projected loss for the year is 5.1 million. The issue with state accommodations, like I said, is we receive them quarterly and they're always a month behind. So with the governor deferring the payment of those taxes, I don't feel like we're really going to see any kind of true good check until October after the third quarter. So I don't know with state accommodations. I mean, we'll be able to tell with municipal and hospitality probably the true effect on the state accommodations tax. I think we can project that, but in addition, Charleston County is a donor county. So we, as part of the Robin Hood clause, we always give up some of ours to smaller counties that don't meet the $50,000 threshold that they like all counties to have. So we feel like we might contribute more to that than we normally do because of the pandemic. So sorry. So I wanted to focus a little bit more on cash flow. Last time we just talked about revenue loss projections, but I just wanted to talk about cash flow a little bit. So right now we've received around 1.6 million, almost $1.7 million in state accommodations tax, and we paid out almost $1 million. We have direct expenditures that we have to pay. We have the revenue bond for the Gibbs and the aquarium, the dash. We've already paid 2 quarters, but we have 2 quarters that we need to pay. And then we have the visitor center renovation also that we budgeted out of this fund. So as you can see, using all of the available fund balance that we have, we're still about $1.7 million out in cash flow purposes to pay for some of the direct expenditures that we had budgeted to pay. That doesn't even include the grantees that we have not paid. We only paid the first quarter. So what I would like to do is, because we don't really know with the deferral and all that, and we won't really know till the third quarter check comes in October, I would like to defer paying the grantees until that time when we see where we might be with revenues, so that we can cover some of these costs that the city has to cover. So that was my recommendation for that.
And who would that include in?
There's like the 49, however many grantees that we granted monies to. We, like I said, we've already paid them the first quarter, so we just have to wait and see. They already know that we can only pay out what we receive. So they know that they're getting a reduction in the amount that they get paid. They're already well aware of that.
And that would include folks like Spoleto and Symphony and
That's right.
Charleston Stage.
Since they canceled the festival, we paid them out already their first quarter. So with them, we would actually need them to provide us some kind of documentation to show that they had to spend more than what we had initially paid in the first quarter, which I'm sure that they did. Some of that we need to be careful with Spoleto and some of the other festivals or events that have canceled.
Hey, Amy, this is Dudley.
Sure.
In light of the care dollars that Carter received, is it possible for us to do something with our DAC shuttle and do something like maybe delay it even a year? I mean, didn't they get 26 million or something like that?
You know what? I don't know that. I know the airport authority got funding, but I didn't hear anything about Carter.
Yeah, Carter got some money too.
That's something.
Carter got money, yeah.
Yes, big money.
We can talk to Councilmember Seekings about that.
Okay.
No, I'm on that board, and they received, I believe, 15 or 16 million dollars, somewhere in that range, and they're buying some new electric buses. But to tell you the truth, they're putting 7 million, I think, in like a reserve. So yeah, they've got some cash.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So this is an agreement that we have with them, and the CVB also contributes to this as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, could I just ask you to go back about the Robin Hood Fund? It's the first I've ever heard you talk about that. Is there some sort of formula for what we should expect that could be a bigger, cut out of that, or? It's
calculated by the state, and it's a pretty complicated calculation. I don't think that we could do it here to figure it out. It's just what the state does in order to provide monies to smaller counties that don't receive a lot of aid tax.
And it's out of our authority
Totally out of our control. Yes.
You're not agree.
Yep.
That's very interesting.
Councilmember Shea.
Amy, there was some background noise, so I had a hard time hearing what you said about deferring the payment of grant fees. What would that amount to? What would be the total if we did defer those fees? How much would we be saving?
I have to give you that number later, Councilmember Shade. I'm not exactly sure.
Are we talking 2 million, 5 million, or?
No, we only granted $2.3 million, I believe, to grantees, and we paid out a quarter of that pretty much. And then I just want to defer it until we get a good handle on how much we will receive from the state, because like I said, they deferred the payment. The governor deferred any organizations having to pay their tax. So by the time we get it, we won't really know until after the third quarter, how much in state aid tax money we will receive.
Councilmember Shade, Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amy, I understand the importance of the renovation of the visitor center, but how much are we on the table for 2020?
A lot.
$2.4 million that you see there, we've actually already paid that out, but we paid that, everything gets paid out of our operating account, and then we do transfers later. So we don't have the funds to transfer back into our operating account to cover what we've already paid. So that 2.4 million is actually already gone, but it's out of our operating account. So we just don't have the funds to transfer it back, pay our general fund back.
Got you. Okay.
Is there any other questions on that page? So, like I said, I would like to hold off paying the grantees until after we receive that third quarter check, if you're all in agreement with that.
Do we need to vote on that?
No, Does anyone have an objection to that recommendation?
No, I would agree to do it.
All right.
So we will notify all of those grantees to let them know.
Okay.
Okay. All right, municipal accommodations, $5.2 million projected loss.
Amy, this is Jennifer. I was just going to ask the committee members if they're not speaking to stay on mute because we're getting some background noise coming through. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So the county and the city both deferred payment of those taxes until June 1st. And there's typically a 2-month lag in when we receive those payments from the county. So we're really not expecting to see a check until August. So it's hard for us to judge how this will look, you know, when we're getting payments so far in the future away from when we normally do. So the biggest effect with municipal accommodations tax is the budgeted transfer that we have to the general fund and to the parking fund. So this is what it looks like right now. We've received little over $1 million. And, you know, this is a 50% that goes to capital projects and 50% that goes for property tax relief. So I've kind of broken it up that way. So we have, you see the transfers to the general fund and the parking fund. So we obviously do not have enough cash to do those transfers in. And then we have certain things like the Johnson Controls debt payment and the Market Streetscape project and the low battery project coming out of that fund. What we did do was look at the Market Streetscape, and we're actually taking that out because we feel like that project could be reduced by that amount in order to cover that. We should be able to reduce that project cost by the $390,000. And so we're going to put that back into fund balance to allow us to have a little bit extra cash in that fund. The low battery project, that's our match to the STIB application. So we need to keep that intact. Any other questions on that? So with that right now, we're not transferring anything either to projects or to the general fund or the parking fund because we need the cash that is there available for the debt payment. So we'll be using those dollars for that payment.
Amy, I was on mute. Isn't that commitment to the low battery really for future years? I mean, we've got the cash on hand for phase 1 that's underway this year in 2020, correct?
We do, but the State Infrastructure Bank wants to make sure that we have that match in place no matter what.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've got to get through our hearing or our review by the State Infrastructure Bank. Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so hospitality, we're projecting $11 million loss. We also deferred the payment of those taxes till June 1st, but our normal due date for those taxes is June 20th. So we made it due on the due date. Yes.
Amy, I hate to go back, but go back to the low battery. And I think for the new members on council, Mr. Mayor, I think the importance of having that match in place for the low battery. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the match that we're trying to get? I mean, the grant that we're trying to get from the SIB.
Do you want me to do that or the mayor? I'm sorry.
Well, you could do it. I mean, if the mayor can add in additionally after you finish.
Okay, so we applied, usually when you're applying for State Infrastructure Bank funds, they like you to have a match, and usually a 50% match of the project to show that you have skin in the game for that project is scored better and higher. So we had, I think around 22, or maybe it was $22 million already set aside when we did the application for the STIB low battery application. And then what we had reserved in 19 brought that up to 27 or so. And so now with the 2020, that will bring us up to almost to exactly the match that we would need for that 50-50 match with the STIB board.
Okay, but I mean, the 50-50 match is to get money for what?
For the low, just for the whole wall.
I understand. We all know that, but new members to council, we voted on all that.
Battery wall. It doesn't have anything to do with Army Corps wall or anything. It's just a low battery wall.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you wanted to add to that, but I thought that background information on why we need to let that money remain should, hopefully an explanation should be there for those new to council.
Well, that's right, and it may be temporary because I don't know what the STIB board is going to do. They were scheduled to have us in Columbia in early March to have a review of the project and the application. And of course, that ended up getting canceled. And latest I heard was they're kind of reevaluating their whole ability this year on grant and their own finances. So we hadn't gotten any official word, but it's a little bit up in the air, and it could be if they delay the whole thing for this year, then we wouldn't have to hold that for this year. We might have to put it back next year when we go back to them. But anyway, the jury's not out on that. We'll see what they do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So back to hospitality fees. So like I said, they were deferred to June 1st, but because the due date is the 20th, we just kept it. So it would be due on the due date of June 20th. We've received some payments. So some organizations or businesses are still paying the fees, even though they don't have to. So that's been good. But we're not sure what businesses will be able to pay the full amount on June 20th when they're due, and what type of revenue we will see with that. And I don't know how many businesses those have closed as well. So like I said, we probably won't know the true effect of this until the probably not until the July 20th payments are due. So we've received $3 million to date, and these are the direct expenses that are within the next probably 3 to 4 months that we'll have to pay out. The agreements that we have with Volvo, the IAM, the Gilliard, and then there's another $500,000 to the visitor center renovations. And then we have some debt for the Energy Performance Fund, the City Market Project, and then Water Gallery, the Waterfront Gallery. So right now we're cash flow wise, we're okay to meet the needs that we have for those expenditures, as long as everything works out okay.
Amy.
Yes.
So these are the items that you want pretty much to delay until September?
No, I only wanted to do that for the grantees for the state accommodations tax.
Okay.
These are right now, the hospitality fee fund looks okay to pay for these expenditures that we see within the next 3 to 4 months. This isn't for the whole entire year. It's only for the next 3 months or so that we know we need to pay out.
Right.
So we're okay in the hospitality fee fund right now for these expenditures.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We're not so good, but state accommodations, but hospitality right now, we're okay. But that doesn't include any of the projects. That's not moving anything to projects. That's just direct expenses that we have.
I got you. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Amy, I'm sorry, I'm having a problem following you on this draft. So the remaining direct expenses that you have listed and remaining direct expenses, remaining agreements, those are funds that you would pay out of the balance of the 1.8 million?
That's right.
Okay. So that would leave us a positive cash balance of $456,000.
That's only because we're using the available fund balance that we have in that fund right now. Otherwise, it would be we would be $1.9 million in the hole. But because we have the fund balance that we can utilize, we're a little bit positive.
Okay, is that 2.3 million part of the 10 million fund balance that you showed us earlier? to offset the
No,
$40 million?
That's an available fund balance that we have above the percentage that we always reserve in these funds. That's the amount above that we can utilize. We can use that without hurting the fund. It's not the transfer that you're talking about that we transfer into the general fund, if that makes sense. Did I?
Yeah, so the $10 million on the transfer funds that are available are not part of this 2.3 million that you're showing down here.
No.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Okay, we good? Oops, sorry. So we've also identified around $5 million in projects from the capital improvement fund that we can push back into fund balance to help with the deficit that we have. And those are the projects that we identified. If you have any questions on that. So the waterfront park shade structures, there's some waterfront TIF funds that are still available. So instead of using hospitality, we're going to use the TIF funds instead. Market Street Streetscape, again, that project could be scaled back to cover those costs. The sports wellness complex, that's just been kind of sitting there for a couple of years. And then the municipal golf course, we've got enough funding in that project that it doesn't necessarily need this hospitality money to move forward with it. Is there any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Can you touch on the Stonyfield piece again?
Yeah, so the Stonyfield project is fully funded without the hospitality funds. And the reason why we utilized hospitality was because of the NCAA track that was going to be put there, which would allow us to use hospitality. And since we're not doing that, we can release the funds and the project is funded anyway.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we're still doing the track, but just not up to NCAA standard.
That's right. So there is still a track. It's just not NCAA standard.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
But we did go back and insist that it be a full 400-meter track, which is a high school standard. And so for the school district, Burke High School, in the event they want to have a full-size track for it and the public. We ended up, I think, saving money on this project because we acted as the general contractor for our portion of the renovations. And frankly, I believe it saved us some nice change. And then we got the school district to pay for half of the upfit on the track to the tune of $300,000 above what they had originally planned to put into it. And then I did want to point out that the money we're able to save for the municipal golf course, you could say is partly due to the private fundraising efforts that we had for to save the muni. We're getting ready to pull $350,000 from that private fundraising effort from their account. So that allows us to pull this 138 back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So now moving on to enterprise funds. Oops, sorry.
Question. I'm sorry. On the wellness and sports arena, that $2 million, is that natatorial money?
That's the land. We were supposed to purchase land with that, yes.
And we haven't done that yet, right?
No, there's been no movement on that project at all.
So that $2 million is just sitting there right now.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So enterprise funds, about a $14 million loss, which most of that is due to the parking fund. We had $6 million in available fund balance, so it's around an $8 million loss that we're projecting. Not much has changed from last month in terms of the revenue loss projections. Most facilities are getting ready to open by this weekend, with the exception of the ballpark, the golf course, and the city market, and obviously the golf course because it's under renovation right now. I know the city market is working on a reopening plan, but it might just take them a little bit longer because that's a lot more confusing and a lot more details need to be worked out for that. And the Maritime Center docks are open now as well. We had originally in our projections anticipated the facilities opening in June with a slow recovery. We've had a lot of phone calls about our facilities and when they're going to open up. So we're hoping that the recovery will be a little bit faster and we'll bounce back a little bit quicker. However, most of the special events in all these facilities have been canceled. So that obviously will have an impact on our revenues. For parking, right now we're about $1 million under budget. We have a 62% loss for all things related to on-street parking. That's the meters, it's violations, it's everything that has to do relate to on-street parking, and 42% loss in our parking garage revenue so far. We anticipate the same level of losses for May. We have noticed in the last couple of weeks an increase in transient parking in our garages, which is where most of our revenue is generated. So like I said, the original revenue loss for all of parking was around 40%. So we'll just have to see how that works out. Transient and hotel parking revenue are where we make the majority of our revenue in the garages. So it's a good sign that transient parking has been up the last couple of weeks. So we'll just have to keep monitoring. ABM, we have some past due accounts, obviously, for monthly parking card fees around $75,000, but we're pretty successful. They've been working really hard with all of these businesses. So we're pretty confident that we'll collect the remaining balance. We did have two requests, or had some requests from the colleges for semester parking. They had asked for refunds, so we're working with them as well. So we're recommending that we apply a credit toward future parking fees rather than giving them a refund.
I doubt you're going to get any objection on that recommendation. Anybody? That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay. So with ABM, they're also implementing some cost saving measures. They have initiated a hiring freeze like we have, and we're deferring some of the larger projects that we had planned with the parking garage repairs, which is about about 4.5 million. And then the Spark and Park Blue project, which was $401,000. So those are both on hold for right now.
Ms. Wharton,
Yes.
I know that the parking garage repairs were sort of, pent up demand a year or two ago. So is everyone who would have been working on those repairs in 100% agreement that we're, not borrowing trouble by keeping the garages unrepaired and in use? Are we deferring too much maintenance, do you think?
Well, we put them on hold through the fall just to see where we stand in the fall. Some of those repairs will have to be done. This is with a double-edged sword, right? Where we are already suffering from deferred maintenance from the last recession we went through. So we really don't want to put ourselves in an even bigger situation with deferred maintenance now that we're going through this. So we just, working with capital projects, felt like we could defer this till the fall, and they were more comfortable with that too, because of just for material wise and cost of construction and things like that. They were more comfortable pushing this off to the fall.
Okay,
That makes
good.
sense.
Thanks. I'm glad I asked the question. Thank you.
So now on to the general fund. So right now, we're about a $5.6 million loss in the general fund. Like I said, we had a $39 million unassigned fund balance as well for exactly this purpose. So we started seeing, like I said, the effects of the recreational facilities and the programs being closed and us not having sports and things like that. Day camps will open in June, so that might help with the projected revenue loss. And we weren't really sure how that was going to work out, if we'd even be able to have camps over the summertime, so that might help. Inspection permits and fees were actually higher in April than we anticipated, so I don't know if that is an indication that people are out there trying to get more work done. Business licenses are on track through the end of April so far. But like I said, the biggest concern is the transfers in from the other funds. So we'll have to see. We have hiring freeze we put in place through June. We're going to extend that through September 30th. It's likely that we would need to extend it through the end of the year. If we did do that, we're projecting a $6 million savings if we did that to the end of the year. We have asked departments to come up or to come to us before they do anything, like I said, new initiatives or any large purchases. A lot of them will have to be deferred. Right now we can't function as business as normal. The state actually did us a favor, surprisingly, and they suspended the employer contribution increase for 1 year. So that will save us approximately $450,000. Fuel savings, fuel prices are lower than what we have budgeted, and we're anticipating a savings of approximately $850,000. So these savings in themselves will cover the projected loss in revenues that we have right now, but they do not cover the transfers in from the parking and the tourism funds. So right now we feel like we have the general fund covered other than the transfers in. Councilmember Shea.
Can you go back that slide you were just on?
Sure.
So the suspended $450,000 savings, that's just the increase. That's not the base amount that we pay. Is that right?
It's just the increase.
What is the base amount that we pay?
Oof, a lot. I don't know.
I know it's a lot of money. Is it like 2 million or something like that?
It's much higher than that. I can get you the number.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Okay. I did cover. Okay. So.
And would you go back to the slide you had with the numbers on? Right up, right there. I just didn't get a good enough look at that one. You're showing where the deficits are coming from, and this is your projection for the year, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, while we're on that scale, Amy, how do we lose $3 million in budget license? Don't the licenses are paid in advance, aren't they?
They usually are, yes, but we got through February and then we deferred payment on business licenses, and we also we froze the late fee at 5% for basically for the rest of the year. So we won't have the late fee charges that we normally would have or that we budgeted for business licenses, and not everybody paid. So and we're not sure with businesses going out of business how that will affect us. So right now that's just what we're projecting will happen. So
can you give us a number of businesses that this $3 million reflects?
I think it's around 12,000 businesses in total, business licenses we have in total in the city.
And so that number is going to be even more impacted for 2021 budget because you will lose those businesses perhaps, plus businesses are going to show a lower revenue than for 2020 than they did for 2019, right?
Yes.
Correct.
And so that number may be, looking down the road, that number may be huge.
In 2021, we'll have a much bigger effect, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So additional considerations, rental income, we have approximately 60,000 in past due rents due from organizations. Some have asked for rent abatements, some for just the time period of the pandemic, some for the remainder of 2020, and then some that have asked for the remainder of 2020 and all of 2021. So we're not recommending forgiveness of rents in their entirety, but we were recommending that we allow those organizations or businesses to stretch the amount that they owe us through the end of the year so that they're paying a little bit every month for the rest of the year instead of paying us the full amount up front now, if you're all okay with that.
I think that's reasonable.
Amy, could I just ask the same question, that you send us a list of who those tenants are?
Okay.
just so we know. Thanks.
Like you don't have enough work.
So, like I said, we're still kind of early in this pandemic to know the true effects. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind. You know, they're talking about another wave of the virus. We have additional costs for additional PPE and things like that to make sure that our employees are safe. Every dollar matters right now. So we need to instill a culture of frugality for the remainder of 2020 and 2021. We're going to really need to be focused just on core services, just to make sure we maintain our financial health.
Amy,
Yes.
Amy, down to the PPE costs,
Mhm.
some of that money in the governor's office, I know it may not be much, but can we get some reimbursement for that from out of the 1.9 billion that the governor's office got potentially?
We can. So we also, I have a FEMA application in as well. And then there is also, the mayor has asked us to document every penny that we can for the 1.9 billion from the state. And then the fire department also just applied for that grant as well. That's specific to fire, that was actually better than FEMA because it's a 90-10, I think. So for the fire department's expenses, they could actually, if they get awarded that grant, they'll get 90% reimbursement for their expenses. So that's better. The state's better. FEMA, is 75-25. So we're documenting all of that so we can get reimbursed. It's just how much money we decide to ask from.
Sure. Thank you.
So if I may add, Amy, to the concept of core services, to provide those core services, we got to have our workforce in place. So frankly, the way I look at where we are right now is the number one goal is to preserve and maintain our workforce. We've already agreed to the hiring freeze, so we're not taking on new employees potentially all the way through the end of the year. And we're going to make every effort. There's nothing I see here today that tells me we won't be able to maintain all of our existing personnel and keep them in that workforce in place. They're amazing. They're working their butts off and they deserve it. So anyway, I just thought I'd share them.
That is correct. So cash flow is, this is one thing I'm really concerned about. So we're working on a cash flow projection just to see where we might start to run low on cash. And this is Councilmember Waring, where we discuss a tax anticipation note. And so we may bring that to council for approval. I'm going to work with our bond counsel on this just to have it in place, just in case we need to go ahead and move on that. I'm thinking, I'm a little worried about maybe possibly September, October, to where we might start to run low on cash. So we need to have that in place before it's too late, because it takes about 2 months. It's a 2-month lead time in order to get that in place.
And Amy, I know that this topic or question came up to you and our bond counsel very early in all of the Congress and the federal activities trying to help the country stay out of the pandemic, the worst effects of it. So I don't know the realities, but I do know that there is certainly some program that we were going to have him look into about how the Fed is dedicated to buying short-term bond debt. So I don't know if essentially our line of credit would qualify for that, but I think that would be a really good thing to make sure we know the answer. Can we have that debt forgiven by the Fed?
Okay. Any other questions on that? So I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Shade.
So if we take out this TAN note, what would be our interest rate on that, and how does that affect our overall bonding rating?
It won't affect our bond rating because we wouldn't have to get a rating for it. And then it's just I would imagine, depending on when we went out, the interest rates are really, really low, just like we experienced with the ban and the refunding we just did. So we just have to see. what the interest rate would be at the time.
Amy,
Yes.
thanks for that explanation. If we did it, what amounts, do you have a feel for the amount of what the TAN would need to be?
Probably maybe 15 million or so,
Okay.
maybe
What
more.
was that number you said?
I'm sorry, maybe 15 to 20 million.
Okay.
It could be more depending.
I mean, but that's good though. I think to be proactive and be positioned, such that whatever information we do receive, the reality we do receive in September, October, with whatever cash flows we get from the state and the other sources, we'd already be positioned to act. And I think that's good thinking on your part. Thank you so much.
And this is Dudley. I mean, isn't that something that we should be recommending right now so that she'd have it in her back pocket?
I would want to bring that to you in June, yes.
Okay, all right.
And Amy, that's under the assumption that we're not touching the reserve at all, correct?
It would probably even be with the reserve, Mayor. So cash in the bank.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
It's just cash in the bank, so yes, it would include the reserve as well.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments?
And so then just looking at other potential savings, if we need to start cutting some expenditures, supplies, travel, professional contracts, things like that, then, we're looking at budgets now. And obviously revenue enhancement, we could increase fees, but nobody probably really going to want to do that right now. But it's another option for us. So looking forward to the 2021 budget again, just to reiterate, we're still feel the effects of the pandemic. We're not expecting tourism to come back. How it will, but skeptical of that. Business license revenue, Councilmember Shea, this is what we talked about. It's based on 2020 income, how many businesses have gone out of business. And just for some additional information, 13.3% of our business license revenue comes from retail and 9.3% of it comes from the hospitality industry. Just thought you might want to know those numbers. So we'll need to cut expenditures back, obviously, in 2021, focus on core services again. And because just the business license, the effect of the business license revenue will require us to do that. Do you have any other questions? And of course, we'll get assessment information and everything from the county too, so we'll have a better idea of property taxes as well. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So Amy, that next to last bullet point, expenditures will need to be cut back in 2021. But what are you thinking about?
I don't know. I think it's a little early for us. The business licenses is really, we need to see how business licenses are doing and what businesses are reporting back to us. So I know that they're looking at all of this now, but that's going to be our biggest issue, I think.
We know for certain that we're going to get a property tax revenue. So we know that money should not change too drastically. That's about roughly about half of our total budget, isn't it? I'm just sort of running that off. Real estate taxes,
40% or so.
Yeah, close to 50%. So this is a significant hit when we look at business license revenue, hospitality revenue, and then you throw in there our parking revenue. We just don't know. It just going to depends how that pans out with Spoleto and tourism dollars coming in and a bunch of other factors. That's going to be a hard thing to be guessing on what 2021 is going to look like.
That's right, because the general fund will just, it's pretty supportive of all those revenues, and it won't be able to be supportive of it next year, and not in the amount that it usually is anyway. So.
Amy, can I follow up on that?
Hold on, Carol. Let me just follow up one more question with you. Do you think that this $40 million is going to hold, or do you think it's going to get even deeper.
Mhm.
People are talking about, you got it on the screen, the pandemic. We may get another wave of this. We may have another shutdown and all this. I mean, there is a danger with this $40 million being $50 million.
Well, that's always a possibility. I'm pretty comfortable with the projection. Like you said, with another wave, I don't know what that will do to us. Hopefully we will have things figured out better than we have, when it first hit us in terms of social distancing and how we protect ourselves. And maybe we'll be able to get through it and weather it better than we did this time if there is a second wave. But it's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Amy, thank you. You do a wonderful job with all of this. I really do appreciate you laying this out for us in the way that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I agree with that statement 100%. I just wanted to follow up with the property taxes, Amy, knowing they're about 40% of our general fund budget. I mean, is there any experience or history in Charleston County that assessments ever go backward? Even would we at worst just see a status quo assessment?
I would say, depending on what the county does, in terms of assessment, I don't know that it would affect it since it's in this current year.
Right.
But you always have to worry about delinquent taxes when you're in this type of a financial situation too, because people, if they can't pay their taxes, so you'll have people that aren't paying taxes, and you'll have more delinquent taxes than you typically would. So it could affect us in some way, for sure.
All right. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions?
Great job, Amy.
Thank you.
Ditto.
For the full council workshop, is there anything additional you would like me to have for you next week?
No,
No?
I think you're pretty thorough.
Okay.
Terrific. Well, great job, everyone. A great job, Amy, I should say, and your team who helped pull all this together. We've got a special council meeting all together at 5:30 this afternoon. So without further ado, I will see y'all at 5:30.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I may not make the 5:30. I'm going to try my best.
Okay.
Okay?
I hope to see you though.
Okay.
Bye, y'all.
Amy, well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Amy.
Thank you.